Chapter 5: The Opposition and its Future. Meaningful change is usually brought about by a much broader movement that encompasses not just the traditional opposition parties. Although some of the opposition parties have lost some of the charm of yesteryears, there is no doubt in my mind that future historians will devote several pages to their courageous contribution when the history of the democratic struggle in Cameroon is written. Of course, the difficult political environment does not facilitate genuine political mobilization and recruitment of members by opposition parties, and therefore, parties tend to hibernate only to resurface around elections. Also, the excessive fragmented nature of these parties and their aggressive positioning do not help, as they have over 200 political parties and associations registered as such at the Ministry of Territorial Administration. In its present configuration, a lot remains to be done to revive citizen confidence and belief in the opposition's capacity to serve as a source of alternative leadership. However, we must also keep in mind that, as in many other countries, meaningful change is usually brought about by a much broader movement that encompasses not just the traditional opposition parties, but also organizations that stand for the basic tenets of democracy, like the Bar Association, Women's Association, labor unions, human rights groups, students and youth, media and community-based organizations. One cannot discount outright the possibility that such a movement can emerge, and with catalytic positive ramifications for the future well-being of our country. In many cases, even reform-minded members of the ruling party are apt to lend their support if they are convinced that the opposition has a forward-looking message and a reasonable platform for the country as a whole. There is a lot to be said about the state of both opposition and ruling political parties and the overall environment in which political parties function in this country. The number of political parties in Cameroon says something about the fragmentation of political mobilization and inability of our political leaders to build and sustain broad-based alliances for meaningful change. So are concerns about the lack of special status for opposition parties and their leaders and questions pertaining to internal democracy within parties. We must remember that viable opposition parties are instrumental to sustainable democracy and the checks and balances that need to be in place to curb abuses of power. Yet I would admit that I am concerned that the true aspirations of Cameroonian Democrats are being eclipsed by the excessive polarization of political discourse and the system of material incentives that seem to guide citizen participation in politics in our country.